Okay, so we are recording and I'm just downloading our application, our little whack-a-mole app that we started the other day. Really bad name for a project, but I'm stuck with it now. Okay, so a bit of a tip again. Actually, I've noticed some labs, remember this issue about unblocking, so all DLLs are accessible? This lab is probably set up because it's the same image as 201. So if I right click on the zip archive, yeah, I don't see it. Normally down here under advanced, there'd be that unblock. Some of the gaming labs, they didn't do that one step when they were preparing them. So if you're working in the gaming lab and you download a zip archive, make sure you unblock because it's not automatically trusting Blackboard like this lab is. Okay. That's a little tip for you. Whew. Good thing if it had taken any longer, it would have run out of. Oh well, there you go. I don't have the vocal range I used to when I used to sing. Okay, thank you. No. All right, so. Oh, by the way, another good tip with these Universal Windows apps, whenever you move it, even in the file system on the same computer, right, or to your USB key or from one computer to another, first thing you should always do is build, right, because it actually refreshes NuGet packages and it often just won't run correctly if you don't do the build right away. And it makes it hard, even some of the development won't. You'll lose IntelliSense and other issues like that. So build right away. See, it's installing a whole bunch of stuff, right, in order to do the build. Okay. Oh, what a bad name for a project. What can I say? All right, so we restored all of our packages. We're good to go. Okay, so here's our little guy. And we can whack-a-mole away. Now, we said the other day, kind of obvious thing that this little unintended game, just to show attached properties and how to modify them in code, is the fact that, you know, you probably need some kind of a way to measure your performance, right? Like count how many times you successfully whack the mole in a given time period, something like that, and then give feedback. Well, maybe we'll use the relative panel for that feedback idea. Yeah, you know, my inclination would be to either do it at the top or the bottom, so I'm thinking probably at the bottom. We should just add another row to the grid, and then we'll stick a relative panel in there so we can have, you know, something floating around to say, you know, how many times you've hit the poor mole and how cruel you are and things like that, right? So maybe what I'll do is I'll just add yet another row definition. And then we'll come down here and we'll add a relative panel, right? Come on. Oh, my IntelliSense doesn't want to be good to me today. Okay, well, I'm too lazy to wait for it, so I'm going to do some copy paste. Okay, so I'm going to put in grid row 8, I think, because we already had 0. No, we had 7, so we have 0 to 6. Ooh, I better be careful there. Well, what I could do is I could add one at the top as well for, and column span 7, right? So column span is kind of neat because it gives us the same effect as call span in a HTML table and so on, right? So my relative panel will take up, even though I've defined columns, it'll take up the whole row, so to speak, right? Okay. So there's my relative panel. Now, grid row 8 doesn't exactly exist yet, so I'll probably have a problem with that. I can just change it to 7. Or I can plan ahead and say, well, maybe I'm going to put some sort of a title in the top one anyway. Because we've seen how we could probably just, in code, do a loop and create all of our rows, our row definitions, and add them to. This is an example where you might actually be better off doing it in code than in XAML. But then again, we can see what's going on. Okay, so inside of our relative panel, I could do one of a couple things. Maybe I'll just throw a text block in, first of all, and then we'll play with its position, right? I'll call it label time, okay? Initially, I figured 10 seconds is enough to irritate anybody with having to whack them all before, you know, the turn stops. So we'll probably start off with a 10-second default. Just giving a bit of a margin and a font size. Now, where does it show up? Well, you can even see in the design view over here. Right, it's going to be over at the left, okay, upper left corner of this row, sitting inside the relative panel. So to actually make use of an attached property, why don't we? I can just do it right here. I'll press enter so it fits on the screen better. I can make my font a little bigger too, but I'm going to run out of room for typing. Now, here's hoping that I'll get IntelliSense here because no, dot, oh come on, control space, no, none of my IntelliSense wants to work for me. Okay, so I'll do a little bit of copy paste here then. So should we just center it in the panel? Right? Align horizontal center with panel. Normally, you know, you should see at the dot and you have a choice of all these different alignment options. They just come up in IntelliSense. Just giving me a hard time today. Obviously, it doesn't want to wish me a happy birthday today, and there you go. I could probably find out why IntelliSense doesn't sometimes work, because it does seem to happen to me every once in a while. I'm not quite sure. I did build. Let's try building again. Maybe I'll have to rebuild. Okay, so next time I'll see if it works. But even now, you should be able to see, of course, the change here, right? That at least it's centered. I might want to make that font a little bigger as well, right? That's not much of a font size. So maybe, oh, 20? That's not too bad. That's pretty good. All right. So anyway, you see, you could play around with the relative panel, center it here, center it there, do whatever you needed. But now at least I have a label where I can show something. So, you know, this is really not a requirement for anything other than having some fun, but we have to add a timer. You've all had the pain and gain of working with timers before, where you have to use them asynchronously. They run on a separate thread, and it's always a bit of an issue. How do we update the user interface regularly when it's running in a different thread and so on? Fortunately, there's this one little timer guy that runs on the same thread as the UI. He's called DispatcherTimer. Ever used that one? Okay, it's I'm not sure if it's totally new with the UAP. It might be, but it's a nice little one we can use. So let me go to the code behind page here. And to implement this, we'll have to do a couple things. Yeah, go away. What I might do is, well, we already have our random number generator up here, right? Okay, so that's missing an assembly. That's probably why, because of these errors, is why I'm not getting my IntelliSense. But it might just go away after a while, so I'll carry on. So I can just create a dispatch timer. Dispatcher timer, I should say, right? And I'll probably want a few other variables, okay, that are kind of at the class level that I can get from everywhere. I figured this, planning this ahead a little bit. The number of times that the timer is ticked, you know, I'll probably set it up to tick every second or so, right? Tick, 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 tick. So I want to keep track of that so I can stop after 10 seconds. Times 2 tick would be how many times I'm going to allow it to go. So I'll plan on 10 probably. And then I need a counter for how many times the player has hit the mole. So we can count that up. Okay, so I'll just create those up here at the class level. And I could throw some code right into the main page initializer here to set those up, but planning ahead a little bit, I probably want to be able to restart the game, right? So rather than just run it once and have to close the application, what I might do is make an actual separate method here that I can call to basically start the game, right? Game setup or whatever I might call it, something like that. So especially since I'm getting a hard time today, I'm going to copy paste. So I'll throw in my game setup, right? So times ticked so far, just to initialize it as 0. So if we're restarting, basically this works, right? Times 2 tick, I'm going to allow 10 ticks of the timer, or 10 seconds. The hits, of course, I'll reset it to 0 in case I've played it once already, put it back to 0 again. So those are just my initial values, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to, mole, okay. I'll make sure he's visible because we might hide him at the end of the game. And I'm going to add a reset button so that you could, at the end of the game, like play again, right? So we'll add that into my panel as well, my relative panel. So probably, hopefully all my underlining will go away, but this one, I haven't actually created that button yet, right? System.string is not defined. Huh. All right. Well, let me come back here. I'm just going to go into the relative panel. And let's throw in my button here. Okay, I named it reset as my referencing code was. Okay. What I thought is the button could just stay there while the game is playing, and it could say quit, right? So if they decide they don't want to wait the whole 10 seconds, they can press the button to quit playing, right? So just getting a bit of a margin and then associating it to a quick event, okay? Now, how am I going to align it? Well, I do need to do that, so I might do relative panel. I've already aligned this one to the panel. Maybe I should do the one to the very left of the panel and the other to the right. Okay, that would be something, and that way they just stay opposite each other as the screen resizes and so on. Okay, so instead of center with panel, I should make this one maybe at the left. Okay, so the text comes out from the left. Align left with panel. And down here, I could align this, align right with panel. That should work. Okay. And I noticed that it's not centered vertically within the panel. Well, that's just a simple assignment as well, right? And you can have multiple ones of these as long as they don't conflict with each other. So align vertical center with the American spelling with panel, and then I'd give the exact same command down here. All right. So I think I can actually, it's set to ARM. Let me set it to x86. I'm not deploying it to the phone just yet. No, I'm definitely getting errors there. Okay, for some reason when I switched the target from ARM to x86. Now I am getting IntelliSense. Kind of a mystery.
Is this running the latest version of like update 3?
I think so. Okay, but now I have all my choices here. So, so this was align horizontal. Oh, it's just align left and align right with panel. Sorry, that's why I was getting an error. So the text I want to align left with panel equals true. And that one is correct. So this will be align right with panel. So I just take out horizontal. And that should fix that. Okay. Oh, yeah, sorry, I didn't make my reset click. Build errors, build errors. Okay, what are we going to do? All right. Well, might as well do that now then. So my idea here, when I click my reset button, I'm going to use it like a toggle. So simplest thing is just check if it currently says one of caption or another, right? So if it says quit, I'm going to switch it to play again. If it says play again, I switch it to quit, type of thing, right? So notice that because it's a content control, right? It doesn't have a text property, so I have to access the content, but to compare it to a string, you have to do a toString. Just little things like that come up as you're doing this coding, because these controls are a little different from the kind you've used with Windows forms before. So if they click quit, right? So they're in the middle of playing and they want to quit the game, we'll just set times to tick to 0. And that way, I don't have to change any of the other it'll just, the next time it does the timer loop, it'll say, oh, wait a second, we've already passed the count of how many seconds to wait, so it will stop the game naturally, right, without me having to intervene in any other way. And then I just set the content to play again, so the button will then just be offering there to play the game a second time. Else, right, so if it says play again, then I make it the content quit, and I call game setup, which is my way of restarting the game. Now I probably, okay, those are just saying they aren't used yet. I don't think that'll prevent me from actually trying to run it. We'll see in a second. Okay, so there's my mole. I have my label down here and my button. So we see with the relative panel how everything, okay, stays where it should be, where I want it to be, and so on, right? Just a simple example. I could play with it, I could swip them around, I could have them go side by side and move back and forth. And mind you, to do that, as he showed in his video, the best thing would actually be to make a stack panel, set your relative panel alignment properties on the stack panel, and then just stack the two together. Otherwise, if you try to put them both center, for example, then they'll overlap each other, right? But the stack panel will keep them as one unit being centered, and that would look more natural. But you know, I'm not going to take time to play with all the variations there. You can easily imagine what they would be. But we are using the stack panel for something at least, right? Okay. So we're almost done. I'm not going to belabor this code too much. I'm just going to post it when we're done here anyway. I just had kind of fun playing with the idea myself. Obviously, we need to do a couple more things, right? Inside the mole click event, what I thought is you wouldn't actually start the game until the first time they hit the mole, right? They whack them, and that's when you would start the timer. So I'm just going to replace the content here with my code, and we'll talk about what we're doing. So I got an immediate if. That works in some languages. Okay, if, right? So my test is just, is the timer enabled? When you instantiate it, by default, enabled is false, right? So if it is false, then we're going to start the game, right? So I enable the timer by starting it, going .start. Then all I have to do is change my button from play again or anything like that to quit, so they can quit the game before the timer runs out if they want to. And then I make the button visible, right? So initially it's not even visible, okay? And then the rest of this is pretty much the same code we had. We check if the sound is playing. If it is, we reset it. Otherwise, we just ask it to play again. And I just increment my hit counter. That's the only other new code. This is pretty much the same, although I am allowing another row, right? So we can actually, because I added 2 rows. Okay. So I'm leaving it out of the very top row where I might throw like a title for the game, or maybe I'll put some kind of a control up there, maybe even a split panel at some point or something. I don't know. But the top row will just be left blank for now. Okay. So the only thing left is the code that I actually have to put for the timer, right? Oh, and there is a little bit to go inside the initializer as well. Sorry, I almost forgot that. So up here, when the page first loads, right, a bit of code to throw in here. My dispatcher timer, okay, I actually instantiate it here. Right, really up there, that's just like a class level reference for it. And I add the event handler for it, my tick event. And then I set the interval. The interval is a time span, so I have to actually instantiate a time span object to pass to it. With a time span, if you hover over, you see there's multiple overloads. The one I'm using just is where I pass in many hours, minutes, seconds. Easiest way to pass in 10 seconds, right? Or sorry, 1 second. So each interval is 1 second. My apologies. Okay, and then we call game setup, right? So the game will be set up and ready to go. But remember, it doesn't start until you whack the mole for the first time. So that's all there. Now, of course, I haven't got this yet. Hey, my little light bulb can help me say generate the actual method. Thank you very much. There's my method, not implemented yet. So that's what I have to do. I have to implement that method and just throw my code in here. Okay. So I increment my counter for how many times the seconds have passed, how many seconds have passed basically, how many ticks have occurred. If the times ticked is greater than or equal to my limit of how long I want the game to play, which I'm setting to 10, then I know I'm done. Game over, right? So I give feedback, game over, and show them how many hits they got. And since they can quit it early, I also want to show them how many seconds they've played, right? Then we stop the timer as well. I set my button to play again, so that instead of quit, now it says play again, so they can restart the game if they want. And then I just changed some visibility here, right? Until they press play again, we hide the mole, because I don't want them to press it while the game is stopped until he says to play again. So I don't know if you've noticed this before, but you'd think visibility would just be true or false, but there's an enumeration, right? There's an enumeration for visibility states, essentially. So if you hit IntelliSense here, you'll see there's a few, and collapsed basically means hidden or invisible or false for visibility, right? While we're here, I'll show you. So there's collapse compared to, right, a whole bunch of different ones. Visible, right? So visible and collapse are the two states that we use all the time. Okay, and then else, right? So we ticked, but we haven't run out of time left, so we'll just update the text of our text block, okay, to show how many seconds are left in gameplay. So just have a little more fun with our mole. I should fix that, they get stretched out of shape, but that's okay. We have our countdown timer. Oop, sorry. But you see it's counting down. Oh, I'm gonna get a lousy score because I was so busy turning the volume down. Okay, I got 7 whacks in my 10 seconds that I was allowed. Now I can play again. But it's a quit button now, so if I want to give up, I can just quit. And it tells me I got 2 whacks in the 4 seconds that I actually played. Okay? So, not exactly ready to make me $1 million yet. But we're making progress, and it gave us a chance to play with the relative panel, although it was a pretty simple implementation, I admit. But at the same time, it also just gave us some fun to play with some of the other things that aren't covered so well in the tutorial. Like, I like this dispatcher timer because you don't have all the hassles of an asynchronous timer running on a different thread and updating the UI, getting it to pay attention to different events and so on, asynchronous events and so on. Right? Nice and simple, it just works. Okay, so I'll post this code, and that's that.